Hello and welcome. It is so good to have you joining us. My name is Carolyne Mathlin. I am the program director for the Evolutionary Collective, and I'm here with Patricia Albere, the founder of the Evolutionary Collective. Occasionally, Patricia will send out an email that we call State of the Unity that we share with you, our Evolutionary Collective community and friends, as a way of sharing where Patricia is, what's happening inside the Evolutionary Collective, and where we're seeing the teachings that are coming through, and how they can support you and inspire you in your own journey. So as Patricia and I were talking about the next one that we wanted to send out, I said, let's do a video instead of an email, because there's something so engaging in that you can be more inside of and a part of with us. And so that's the genesis of why we're here with you today. So thank you for joining us. And Patricia, it's good to be with you.
Yeah, always.
So it's always fun to start with the origin story, right? There's all these movies about the origin stories of all these different characters. So let's journey back 13 years. And because I think there's something really important about why you founded the Evolutionary Collective in the first place. You know, what made you do it? What started you on this?
Yeah, and as I've said before, the way something starts is the way it goes. You know, so it's probably useful for everybody to know that, you know, like where something begins from, you know, whether it's a relationship or a teaching or an organization, is always within where it goes. Yeah, so 13 years, I know it's unbelievable. So where this started, and I would not have started something if it wasn't as compelling a reason as it was, which is that I felt that after a couple of years I stopped working, doing my individual work with groups and with people working on their individual practices, process, transformation. I just felt like the space was very full, and there were a lot of people doing that, and wonderfully. And I was just, after, you know, teaching 150,000 people, you know, there was part of me that was just like, what's next? And is there a what's next? Is there another dimension or domain within which to work? And I tend to enjoy, I think I'm better at, in my teaching, working with what some people used to call the black belts, you know, like people who have a certain amount of intensity, a certain amount of interest in going where one can go. And so I put together a group of, I think there was 25 people in the first group out in East Hampton. And the only promise I made was that we were going to discover what would be possible if we worked together, not on our individual stuff, but inside of what could happen if we started to connect from a different place collectively. And the source of the connection came from the relationship that I had with Peter 20 years before that, or 15 years before that. So I had lived a 4-year extraordinary dual awakening with another exquisite man, with a person. And, you know, we had this mind-blowing kind of awakening, and then he died. And I, you know, there's many people have heard the story, so I'm not going to go into it, but I never quite was like, well, what? You know, like, I wouldn't have missed it for anything, but I didn't have a larger context for what it was for. And when I started this 13 years ago, it was the first time that it went, oh, maybe if I could bring people together and we could have 20 people or 50 people or 100 people beginning to turn into the level of connection that Peter and I had, not as lovers, but as people connecting and hooking up in some similar way, then what could the energies of the universe do with that? Because I saw what happened to us. You know, I mean, we were taken in a certain way that was extraordinary and was personally and individually incredibly empowering. So that's where it started. And that is the source of the work. I mean, that hasn't changed. There's the continual question, that's always like, and how does that work? And how does that work? And how does that work? Is how do human beings come together in shared circuitry, in shared, how do we literally come into oneness that is sustained, that is real, and that makes it possible for the greater evolutionary pull? There are energies and things that are actually happening that we can have access to that we don't have access to on an individual basis. So that continues. And it's not like, oh yeah, we figured it out, like done. I mean, it's just kind of mind-bogglingly a new domain. We have figured out on an individual level, if we think about, like shadow work and, meditation and the various things. I mean, we've figured out a lot about how that works and how to liberate people and how to bring people out of suffering and how to have your mind-body connection. And, there's just, it's unbelievable. It's like the scientists in that domain have figured out how to make things work. So if it was a Newtonian universe, like there's this ridiculous richness of what has been created. In this is like discovering physics. Like barely have we discovered, what is possible and what can be created in a very different domain of existence, consciousness, love, and potentials and possibilities. So, we're still scratching the surface. We have definitely discovered some things that are reliable, that we have reliable access to, but, it's an endless, it definitely keeps me out of trouble or in trouble. I don't know.
I don't know.
It keeps me busy. I don't know if it keeps me out of trouble. Yeah. That's the wrong way to say it. It definitely keeps me very busy. Like I wake up in the morning literally into the potential and the possibility of what can happen with shared unity for humanity.
Yeah, and what's been particularly alive is that over this last year, there's been some real openings. Like there's been some there's moments of discovery and there's moments of like breakthrough, and then it's like, okay, we're in a new
Yeah.
dimension. Something has just literally opened.
Yeah,
so can
true.
you talk a little bit about that and what you're seeing, how that's influenced, the group that we have in the Evolutionary Collective called the Core, and then, even global and out from there.
Well, and how everything affects everything. I mean, the other thing
Absolutely.
is, it isn't like, some people create programs and things, for different reasons. This is very organic in everything supports everything. Like there's knowledge and there's things that we could teach or I could teach that are kind of over here that would be super useful to people, on its own, right? As a standalone. Mm-hmm. But that isn't everything that's inside of what we're doing. Everything supports everything. Otherwise we don't do it, right? And so just to do a little bit of a timeline. So the Core, which started out with those 25 people 13 years ago and has grown to larger sizes and smaller sizes, depending on the depth. What kept happening was people would be attracted. We would begin to fulfill certain possibilities and potentials. And then there was a greater demand for purity and for a kind of really being inside and really letting this affect your life in a big way. And so people would then fall out, and then people would go deeper, so there's been this kind of, like shaping, which makes sense, even on an individual level, when you're seriously taking on your own work and healing, you have choice points where you go deeper. You can sort of stay where you are for the rest of your life, more or less, kind of enjoying a certain level of, stability and sanity and access to, connection. Or there are people that continue to make a choice and go deeper, and make a choice and go deeper or higher, connected, because being a mystic, you can go forever. There's no end to the potentials. And it's the same thing with this. So the Core has continued to deepen. But then when I wrote the book, Evolutionary Relationships, Unleashing the Transformative Power of Mutual Awakening, and I wrote about the practice, because the practice had literally come into existence in a way that I had never, there was no specific practice. 3 years into the core, we were doing different things, but it had never really culminated in this very specific half-hour way in which to bring people in. And then from there, I wrote the book, and it just kept changing and changing and getting deeper and more clear in the origin point and all these different things that have allowed it to be really powerful and very reliably accessible, so that when people do it, it's like boom, 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 you can find it with each other, and then the space is deepened. So when I wrote the book, as you know, I wrote it thinking, okay, I'm sharing this with the world. But then I realized, if I don't create a way to teach people and take them there myself, how many people are really going to figure it out through the book? So then we created a 4-part teaching for that. Many people started to do that. And then they were like, well, who do we do this with? And so then we created Global, and the Global community, which is a practice community, which is ongoing, is a place where people can continue to practice ongoingly. And somehow having that for almost the last 2 years, it'll be 2 years in April, that has also created this consciousness that has contributed to the core and vice versa. So there's something about the practicing every day, people from around the world, every day, that's there, that's also, we didn't have that. And so that's enriching also the, where the core can go. So there's a very, synergistic connection in the growth of that. So does that help to at least answer where it came from and where it's growing?
Yeah, and really, what are you seeing now? Because you talk about the language of evolution is emergence.
Yeah, that is for sure.
Yeah, which is different than looking at what can we change, how can we improve this? There's, it's like, what's on the edge, Right. So I'm curious, what are you seeing there? Yeah. What's emerging?
I just want to underline one thing too there, because we've said this many times in the work. There's also the way that we approach this through all of it is, rather than theoretical things that I'm saying, well, this is the way it is, and this is how it is, and this is what you should look for. And I say some things, that people agree with or don't agree with. But for the most part, I don't care. What matters is giving people the ability and the consciousness to find out what is real and and as they find it, it's coming alive. Do you know what I mean? That emergence is happening. So the reality, the shared reality, the shared discovery, the allowing that to affect me, to affect it, that's what matters. So, and there's no controlling that. So, the discovery that happened in the last few months, I can't remember, maybe 4 months ago, where all of a sudden, there are times where that's happening, and then I'm having questions and I can't see things, and and then all of a sudden, something opens and there's a revelation, and you can see what you could not see before. That was the same thing with the practice. We didn't have the practice in the beginning. We were doing different things. And then all of a sudden the practice kind of went, it was like a little flower, it was kind of like, hello, here I am. And then that has continued still to develop, not in the form of it, but in the depth and the clarity and the access. And what happens when people practice and how much easier it is to find, right? All of that keeps changing. But there was, and there's still an exciting, kind of plethora. We're in one of those revelation waterfalls right now, where something started to open 4 or 5 months ago, and now it's been woo, 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 and then you feel, oh, what about, you find the problem, and then you're going, what? You feel like you're in the dark, and then the clarity is coming more and more quickly. of where to go and what to explore and what is needed in the people that are willing to be the ones to bring it through.
Yeah,
So,
and that's an exciting place to stop for now, and guarantee that we will talk about that in part 2 of our conversation, so that we can go into that with some more depth. And,
yeah, I would love to.
Yeah,
I'm excited about that. Okay,
yes.
thanks,
All right,
Carolyne.
so
Thank
thank
you,
you so
everybody.
much, and thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll hope to see you again soon.